Kia ora tātou, and thank you again to all of our presenters who have joined this live Q&A session, as well as all of our attendees who have logged on during this slightly later time slot. Thank you very much for giving up your time. As you know, the theme of today's agenda is digital transformation of K-12 education. I will quickly introduce our esteemed presenters who have been on earlier, beginning with Howard Youngs from the Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand. Earlier, Kia ora, Howard. Earlier, Howard discussed how the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the digital transformation of education. We then have Chris Lawrence from Te Kura and Steve Elliott from D2L, who presented together on big picture learning, a really informative session as well. Kia ora to you both. And finally, we are also joined by Mary Camp from Education New Zealand Manapo Kitiao, one of our business development managers, who showcased the New Zealand Global Competency Certificate, which has been a hugely successful initiative that has been designed to maintain the connection between international learners during the pandemic. Now, I'm going to quickly scroll through the Q&A box. Again, any attendees, please type directly into the Q&A and we'll attempt to answer as many of those as possible. I will start with this one for Howard. There's a bit to answer in here. What do school leaders need to be aware of in order to effectively lead this transformative change? And what do they need to equip their teachers with to get them on board?
Yeah, good question. There's two aspects to that. One, because this creates some more work and new initiatives for schools, school leaders have to first of all consider what do we need to do less of, what do we need to stop doing. So then we can create the spaces for our teachers to become more engaged with digital technology and particularly blended learning approaches. If I don't address the aspect of what do we do less of, well then expecting teachers to move more into digital technology may have an impact on teacher well-being and their effectiveness in the teaching space.
Thanks, Howard. And related to that, in your view, what are the advantages and disadvantages of digital transformation, particularly in providing authentic learning experiences for students?
Great, yeah, thank you. Another good question. And I think rather than say have it as advantages and disadvantages, there's a paradox, and it depends also on what the students are expecting, and also on the student's location and what the circumstances are around the student in a certain region at a certain time. Because some students in some situations will be expecting full online engagement, and so they will be fully engaged. Where students are not expecting that so much and they're more reliant on face-to-face, they will mostly appreciate the blended approach. And so we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach there in terms of advantages and disadvantages. I think the key thing is understanding the context and keep checking with students in terms of their well-being and particularly their engagement about how they learn. Not just to rely on, for us as adults, how we think they learn, but to actually ask the students how they learn. That's the key.
Thanks, Howard. I'll pass it over to Chris at Te Kura. Te Kura's been probably a few steps ahead in this space than others. Chris, in your presentation, you talked about the support structure that's required for both students and parents as well when making the transition to online learning. Are you able to expand a little bit more on why that's been so important?
It's actually fundamental to the actual transition from going to a digital space is to bring people with you, and to show leadership within that space is to engage not just the students but also staff, teachers, instructors, and also the family of the students as well. And acknowledging that and bringing them into the equation makes life a lot easier in terms of the change that everyone's going through from students to staff. The support models that we've put around staff include sort of professional development, and then we've got a huge communication sort of drive with our students in terms of informing them what we're actually doing, what we're changing, and how that's going to affect their learning.
Thanks, Chris. Another one for you. You also talked about the creating that really simple environment, or an environment that is as simple as possible for the students. Can you also explain in a bit more detail how your students were a key part of that design process?
Yep, absolutely. It's something that was fundamental when we went into this at the very, very start, was to get the engagement from the student and actually develop and design spaces and environments for specifically them. And that was everything from focus groups to testing to trials, but to actually get them involved and actually see them work through problems that we had, created a space which we knew would hopefully work for the masses following that.
Great, thanks, Chris. Steve, this one might be for you. You also talked in the presentation how D2L worked with the Ministry of Education during the lockdowns in New Zealand to help with that transition with platforms. Is that something you'd be keen? You may be doing this already, but is that something you'd be keen to explore with other government agencies in the Asia region to help support any further transitions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the partnership with Takura was really, we were providing the technology enablement, and Takura was providing the content, the rich curriculum from lower levels up to year 13. But we've been doing this for nearly 20 years, and as an online provider, but we operate with many different environments where it's a blended environment. Some of our big universities in Melbourne, who went through the COVID experience, went from face-to-face online, and now they're looking at really 3 models: face-to-face, blended, pure online. So we'd be more than happy to talk to anyone with the experience we've had with all those different types of models.
Great, thanks, Stephen. We can help make those connections following this. Kia ora, Mary. I'll hand it over to you now. There's a number of questions that are coming through related to NZGCC.
Right.
This is predominantly an India audience here. They're asking, is GCC available in India?
Well, the short answer is yes. The GCC was developed by AFS American Field Scholars, so they operate in a whole lot of countries around the world. India, I'm sure, will be one of those. What ENZ has been particularly doing with it is working with some of our key partners. Right now, we've got a group of Indian high school students doing the program with a group of students from the north of New Zealand, from Whangarei and Northland, and it's that combination, particularly because the content of the program is about global competence. It's having that rich cultural learning virtual classroom experience where a lot of the value is for us. So in terms of ENZ's work with the NZGCC, we're really keen to have New Zealand learners alongside learners from other countries. But if you're interested in the GCC, you can talk to us, but you can also talk to your local AFS American Field Scholars office and country.
Thanks, Mary. There's another question. Can teachers also attend or participate in the NZGCC program?
Great question, and we've just been talking about this today because, for a start, we have NZGCC as an adult program for those who are either in the international education industry or who are just teachers generally. Coming up in a couple of months, we've got some New Zealand teachers, again, in classes with teachers from Indonesia, South Korea, and so on, because, again, it's that rich learning experience. In terms of teachers just wanting to kind of participate or be in some of the sessions without participating fully, that isn't something that works very well. We've heard in terms of facilitator feedback and student feedback that it can be inhibiting for students to feel that teachers are there just listening. There is a lot of self-reflection and involved in the program. So while we really value having teachers as part of it and very happy to deliver the GCC to groups of teachers, we discourage them from just listening in on the student sessions.
Great, thanks, Mary. There's another question here which I'll read word for word. I want to ask Mr. Lawrence, how has the adoption of technology changed the way students engage in the programs now?
Good question. I suppose the biggest thing that we've seen is the response, and I mean probably response time between the communications from our teachers to our students. Primarily it was through post and emails and communication that way, but now it's almost instant once we've got every single person within this environment. So the mechanisms in terms of what they use to respond and give feedback and feed forward range from instant messaging to emails to video conferencing, what we're doing right now. And so that has been a major impact on the relationship building as well, which is probably one of the key things that we're looking at in terms of our students, is building those relationships between teachers and students, and having the ability to do that in a way that the student works has been a major success for us anyway.
Thanks, Chris. Another question here. I'm happy to open this to the floor, or Howard, this might be a good one for you to potentially start to answer, is what would be the impact of digital transformation in getting jobs in New Zealand?
I think it's, I mean, it's quite a broad question. Look, just from what I've picked up, a person can have qualifications around digital technology. But one of the key things I think that employers are looking for is people with portfolios and people who have experience. And the challenge is trying to get digital experience. So there's two levels here. One is where the use of digital technology is the core of the type of job that somebody is looking for, e.g. programming, doing AI, or is it supplementary? Is it part of the work that you're trying to do? And so I think that's one of the key discerning aspects here, but I'll just leave it to some of my other panel members to maybe add to that or bring in some other perspectives.
Would anyone else like to contribute to that one, or we can move on to the next question? We are running short of time. Perhaps I'll go on to this next one, and this might be for you as well, Chris, or potentially Steve as well. Are there any free sample learning resources at Te Kura or with D2L, which can be shared with other countries to understand the products more?
Yeah, we've got basically an entry point into our environment, which is what we call our showcase. And this basically gives you an indication of the curriculum resources, but also the Desire to Learn product itself. And you can just go and have a look. I'm happy to give those details out to whoever wants to go and have a look and a bit of a play around to see what we've done over the course of the last few years.
Thanks, Chris. And you also mentioned during the presentation you have, I think, over or around 25,000 learners sort of across the globe. I imagine the content is then sort of tweaked where it needs to be for those different countries. Would that be right?
It's all based on the New Zealand curriculum, so it is a local curriculum, we'll call it. But our students they range from all over the globe, and not all of them are first English speakers. So there's a huge diversity from 3-year-olds to 83-year-olds within that space. So
it's a big sphere. Yeah. Well, thank you very much to everybody. I think we are very quickly running out of time. Again, thank you very much for taking the time to, well, first of all, present and then to join this live Q&A. I think we've answered all of the questions that are currently in the Q&A box. There are a couple probably more individual questions which we can potentially help follow up with directly after this session. But again, thank you everyone for joining, and particularly to the attendees joining in from India. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. Thanks.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you.